I used to think family was something unshakable, something that, no matter how flawed, would always be there. I believed that for years, even when the cracks started forming, even when I felt like an afterthought in my own home. It wasn't until recently that I realized just how wrong I'd been. Growing up, it was always mom, dad, and me, our little unit. My parents were never perfect, but they loved me in their own way. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the divorce. I was 7, too young to understand why Dad suddenly packed his things and left. Too young to realize that for some people, marriage is just a convenience. And when it stops being convenient, they walk away. Dad moved out, but he made sure I was taken care of. He left the house to Mom and sent enough child support that she didn't need to work, which, looking back, was the beginning of everything. Because once Mom no longer needed to work, she started needing something else, someone else. That someone was Steve. At first, Steve was nice enough. He brought candy when he visited, told me jokes that made Mom laugh, and always acted like he wanted to be my friend. They got married barely a year later, and shortly after, my half-sister Cindy was born. That's when things started shifting. Subtly at first, Mom's attention drifting towards Cindy, Steve making little comments when we were alone. "Don't you miss your dad?" he'd ask with a smirk. "Wouldn't you rather live with him?" Like he wanted me to leave, like he was testing the waters. Then, when I was 12, I found out why. It was late, past my bedtime, but I had crept downstairs for a glass of water when I heard them talking in the kitchen. I don't know what made me stop, but something in their voices, low, urgent, made me linger by the doorway. "I got the promotion," Steve was saying. "My salary's nearly doubled. You don't need the child support anymore." Mom hesitated. "That money helps." "Oh, come on, Sarah," he scoffed. "Jessica would be better off with her father. Plus, wouldn't it be nice to focus on our family? On Cindy?" Silence. A long, heavy silence. I remember holding my breath, waiting, hoping. Then Mom sighed. "You're right. I'll call Mark tomorrow." It felt like the floor had vanished beneath me, like I was standing on nothing. The glass of water in my hand felt cold and useless, forgotten. My own mother, my mother, was giving me away because she didn't need the money anymore. She acted like she was doing me a favor when she told me. "Your dad can give you more opportunities," she had said, her voice smooth, casual, like she wasn't just trading me away because I'd become financially inconvenient. Dad welcomed me with open arms. No questions, no hesitation. He painted my new room my favorite color, filled the bookshelf with every series I loved. That first night, he sat on the edge of my bed, his voice soft. "I'm sorry things worked out this way, kiddo," he said, "but I want you to know something. You'll always have a home with me." Those words became my anchor. Mom, on the other hand, barely checked in after I left. A few holiday calls, an occasional text, nothing more. For years, I was okay with that. I had Dad. I had my life. I had a future. But then Dad got sick. It was fast, unforgiving. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 4. I was 28 when I lost him, and the grief was unbearable. But the moment I inherited his estate, the moment I was left with his beautiful apartment and his $700,000 savings, my phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen, her name flashing at me like some kind of cruel joke. I hadn't heard from her in years. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the best of me. "Jessica," she said when I picked up, her voice hesitant, almost soft. "I heard about your father. I'm so sorry." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Thanks." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Listen, I know this might not be the best time, but Steve passed away too. A heart attack. And I've been thinking about you a lot. I should have known right then and there, but maybe I was too tired to fight. Maybe I wanted to believe she'd changed. One coffee meetup turned into 2, then 3. Then I met Cindy again, now a grown woman, 21 years old, bouncing between jobs, seemingly directionless. Mom had taken up a cashier job at a supermarket, far from the days when she didn't have to work. I started visiting them more often. I brought small gifts, souvenirs from my work trips, just little things at first, but soon it became expected. A routine, a requirement. And then, one day, Mom finally asked me for something bigger, a favor, a request, and just like that, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I should have seen it coming. I should have known better, but I didn't, and that was my mistake. It started small. Mom would casually mention something she needed, a new microwave because hers was acting up, some extra cash to help Cindy out with her car payments. "It's just a little tight this month, sweetheart," she'd say, her voice laced with just enough helplessness to make me feel guilty for hesitating. At first, I didn't mind. After all, I had the money. And part of me, some deep, foolish part, wanted to believe this was my chance to rebuild a relationship with them. Maybe if I helped, things would be different this time. Maybe, finally, I'd be more than an afterthought. But the requests didn't stop. They grew. Mom and Cindy started texting more often. Little, just checking in messages that always ended with, "By the way, could you help with this?" Or, "Cindy's been eyeing this new laptop for work. Think you could pitch in?" I tried to tell myself it wasn't transactional, that they were reaching out because they cared. Then came the family meeting. "Jess, honey, could you come over for dinner?" Mom asked one evening. "I want to talk to you about something important." Something about her tone put me on edge, but I agreed. Maybe she was finally going to acknowledge everything. Maybe she wanted to apologize. I should have known better. When I arrived, Cindy was already sitting at the table, flipping through something on her phone. Mom was unusually dressed up, wearing a floral blouse I hadn't seen before. The smell of pasta filled the kitchen, and for a brief moment, I let myself think this was just a normal family dinner. But then Mom cleared her throat, folded her hands on the table, and said, "So, sweetheart, we've been thinking, you know how things have been a little tough for us lately? Here it comes." I nodded cautiously. "Well," she continued, "we were wondering if you could help us out with something a little bigger this time." "How big?" I asked, my stomach already tightening. Cindy rolled her eyes like I was being difficult. "Relax, Jess. It's not that big of a deal. We just thought, since you're doing well now and we're struggling a bit, maybe you could, you know, buy us a house." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Mom gave me a tight, practiced smile. "Not anything extravagant, of course, just something comfortable. A fresh start for me and Cindy. We could really use a stable home, and you—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You have the means to help us." I stared at them. The nerve. The absolute audacity. I let out a small laugh, more from shock than amusement. "You're asking me to buy you a house?" Mom's expression wavered, like she'd been expecting me to be more eager. "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad, but it's not like you can't afford it, sweetheart. Your father left you that apartment, and you've got savings. It wouldn't even make a dent in your finances." I looked at Cindy, who was still scrolling on her phone like this was all perfectly reasonable. I felt something snap inside me. "You do realize I worked for everything I have, right?" My voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "I studied. I built a career. I didn't just wake up with money." Mom sighed dramatically. "Jess, we're family. Families help each other." Oh, that was rich coming from her. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "You're right. Families help each other. But you didn't help me when I needed you." Her face hardened. "That was a long time ago." "Not to me," I said. "You made your choice, Mom. You sent me away because I stopped being useful to you. And now that I have money, suddenly I'm useful again?" Cindy scoffed. God, you're so dramatic. We're not asking for much. I turned to her, my anger simmering beneath my skin. Not much. You want me to buy you a house? Cindy shrugged. You live in a fancy apartment. You're always traveling. What's the big deal? You're just hoarding money while your family struggles. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. I worked for this life, and I won't apologize for that. Mom's voice took on that saccharine, guilt-tripping tone I knew all too well. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on us? I gritted my teeth. No, I'm setting boundaries, and if you can't respect them, then maybe you're the ones turning your backs on me. Silence. Then Mom sighed, shaking her head. I thought you were better than this, Jessica. I almost laughed. No, Mom. You thought I was easier to manipulate. I grabbed my coat and walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. No texts, no calls. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like relief. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I should have known they wouldn't take no for an answer. For weeks after that disastrous dinner, Mom and Cindy went silent. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first, I felt relieved, but the longer the silence stretched, the more unsettled I became. It wasn't like them to give up so easily. Then, one morning, I woke up to a flurry of missed calls and unread messages from an unknown number. My stomach clenched as I clicked on the first voicemail. Jessica, honey, I don't know how this happened. Mom's voice was thick with manufactured panic. The bank just called. They said the money you transferred is gone. I sat up straight, my pulse spiking. What money? I scrolled through the texts, my fingers trembling. Then, I saw it, an automated bank alert. A $50,000 transfer had been processed to an unfamiliar account. I hadn't authorized anything. My blood ran cold. I called my bank immediately. The representative's voice was calm, almost detached. Yes, ma'am. The transfer was authorized from your account 3 days ago. That's impossible. I didn't send anything. She hesitated. It was processed using an approved beneficiary. The account belongs to Sarah Bennett. My mother. The room tilted. She stole from me. I barely registered the rest of the conversation. The bank explained the transaction had been approved using credentials tied to an old joint account, one I had opened in college when Mom had convinced me she needed emergency access for my tuition deposits. I had forgotten to remove her from it, and now she'd drained it. A white-hot wave of fury surged through me. My own mother, who had once given me away like an unwanted pet, had now stolen from me. And worse, she thought she'd get away with it. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to her house. By the time I got there, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep them on the wheel. I didn't bother knocking. I pushed the door open and stormed into the living room, where Mom and Cindy sat comfortably on the couch. Cindy was lazily scrolling through her phone, while Mom sipped coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. The picture of calm. Until she saw my face. "Oh, Jessica!" Mom feigned surprise, setting her mug down. "I was just about to call you back." "Where's my money?" Silence. Cindy finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "Geez, relax. It's not like you're broke." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. "You stole from me!" My voice was shaking, but not with fear, with pure, unfiltered rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mom sighed, pressing her fingers to her temple like she was the victim here. "Sweetheart, listen, we needed it. Cindy had some expenses and I laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "Expenses? What expenses?" Mom hesitated. Cindy, however, didn't. "We booked a trip." Cindy stretched like this was a casual conversation. "Italy. You know, since you wouldn't help with the house, we figured we deserved at least something nice. You were just hoarding that money anyway." I stared at her. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. Mom reached for my hand, her expression placating. "We were going to tell you, honey, but we knew you'd overreact." I yanked my hand away like her touch burned. "Overreact? You stole from me to take a vacation?" Mom's patience finally snapped. "Oh, for God's sake, Jessica. Grow up. You're rich. What's 50,000 to you? Do you know how hard life has been for us?" I felt something inside me harden, something final. I took a slow breath. "You know what, Mom? You're right. I do have money. Because I worked for it. Because I built something for myself. And you? You've done nothing but take." Mom scoffed. "So that's it. You're cutting us off over a little money?" I smiled. "No, I'm cutting you off because you're poison." Her eyes widened. "Jessica, no." My voice was eerily calm now. Cold. Final. "I'm calling the bank. I'm reporting this as fraud. You'll be investigated. And I'm pressing charges." The color drained from her face. "You wouldn't—" "I absolutely would." Cindy shot up, her face contorted with outrage. "You're being a selfish I turned on my heel and walked away. This was it. The last time I'd ever let them manipulate me. Mom's voice followed me to the door. "Jessica, wait, we're family." I stopped in the doorway, and I smiled. "That's the funny thing about family," I said softly, turning to look at her one last time. "It's only family when it goes both ways." Then I walked out, and this time, I wasn't looking back. The fallout was immediate. The moment I left Mom's house, my phone exploded with texts and calls. The first few were predictable, frantic, desperate attempts to manipulate me. "Mom, Jessica, please, let's talk about this." "Mom, it was a misunderstanding. You're overreacting." "Cindy, seriously? You're calling the bank. You're such a drama queen." "Mom, I'm your mother. How could you do this to me?" Then the tone shifted. "Mom, you're cruel. After everything I've done for you. Cindy, you're a selfish, ungrateful brat. No wonder no one in this family wanted you." That one hurt. I knew she was lashing out, but damn if it didn't hit me in a place I didn't want to acknowledge. But I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked their numbers, filed a fraud claim with my bank, and let the process begin. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about principle. For years, they had taken from me my childhood, my trust, my belief that family was supposed to be something safe. This was me taking something back. It didn't take long for them to escalate. The next morning, I found dozens of missed calls from unknown numbers. Then, an email popped into my inbox. From Sarah Bennett. Subject, "You owe me this." I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Jessica, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're acting like a spoiled child. You have no idea what it's like to struggle. Cindy and I needed that money. You were supposed to help us. Instead, you've turned your back on your own family over something so trivial. Do you really want to be responsible for your mother losing her home? For your sister suffering? Fix this before it's too late." I stared at the email for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The guilt, the part of me that had spent years trying to be the good daughter, itched to respond. But I didn't. Instead, I clicked block sender and closed my laptop. 3 days later, I got an unexpected visit. It was late, almost midnight. I was curled up on the couch, a mug of tea in hand, when a furious pounding rattled my apartment door. I already knew who it was. I took my time getting up, my heart pounding in my chest, but my hands were steady as I opened the door. Mom stood there, her face red with anger. Cindy just behind her, arms crossed, radiating smugness. "You've made a huge mistake," Mom hissed, pushing past me into my apartment like she still had that right. I didn't stop her. I simply closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Enlighten me." She whirled around, her hands shaking. Not with fear, but rage. The bank froze my account. I didn't blink. I'm aware. Her jaw clenched. Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea how humiliating this has been? They flagged my account, Jessica. I could be investigated. I tilted my head. That's what happens when you steal from people. Cindy let out a disgusted scoff. Oh my God, you're so self-righteous. You could have just sent the money and avoided all this drama. Drama? I repeated, my voice eerily calm. You think you're the victim here? I turned to Mom, my chest tightening with every ounce of betrayal, anger, and exhaustion I'd buried for years. You know, I spent so long trying to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, you actually cared about me. But you don't. Do you? You never did. Mom's face flickered, just for a second, before she recovered. That's not true. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Really, because the moment Dad stopped sending money, you got rid of me. And the moment I had money, you came crawling back. Jessica, don't do this, she said, her voice suddenly softer. We're family. No, Mom, I said, my voice stronger than it had ever been. We were family when I was 7. We were family when I was 12, begging you not to send me away. But we stopped being family the moment you decided I was only worth what I could give you. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. I'm done being your bank account. I'm done being the daughter you remember when you need something. I stepped forward, staring her dead in the eyes. You can figure this out without me. Cindy scoffed. You're gonna regret this. I smiled. No, I won't. Then I walked to the door, opened it wide, and gestured for them to leave. Mom hesitated, searching my face for any sign of weakness, but there was nothing left for her to find. Cindy muttered something under her breath, grabbing Mom's arm and yanking her toward the door. They stomped out, but not before Mom turned one last time. I hope you can live with yourself, Jessica, she said coldly. I met her gaze, unflinching. I finally can. And then I shut the door, for good. For the first time in years, I felt free. The weight I'd carried for so long, the guilt, the endless cycle of trying to earn their love, was gone. I deleted every blocked message without reading them. I changed my banking information, tightened security on all my accounts. I told my job to ignore any calls from concerned family members. Then, I booked a flight. To Greece. I had no itinerary, no grand plan, just one decision. I was finally going to live my life for me. Dad's words echoed in my mind as I watched the sun rise from my plane window. You'll always have a home with me. And maybe I didn't have him anymore, but I had his love, his lessons, and that was enough. That would always be enough. It took time. Healing isn't instant, no matter how much you want it to be. The first few weeks after cutting off Mom and Cindy were filled with a strange, conflicting mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, guilt, freedom. I had moments where I almost reached for my phone to check for messages, only to remember they weren't part of my life anymore. Other times, I found myself staring at old photos, wondering if things could have been different. But then, there were the good moments. I spent 2 weeks in Greece, alone. I wandered through ancient ruins, ate dinner by the ocean, and let the sound of the waves drown out all the noise that had lived in my head for years. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to justify my choices. I could just be, and it was beautiful. When I returned, everything felt clearer. The space in my life that my mother and sister had once occupied no longer felt like a loss. It felt like room to breathe. One night, as I sat in my apartment, Dad's apartment, I realized something. I had spent so much of my life chasing something I was never going to get. I had given them so many chances, hoping they'd love me the way a family was supposed to. But love isn't something you have to beg for. It isn't something that only exists when it's convenient. Dad had loved me. He had proved that love every single day, in the way he had supported me, in the way he had made sure I never felt like a burden. That was real. What Mom and Cindy wanted? That wasn't love. That was entitlement, and I was done feeling guilty for choosing myself. 3 months passed before I heard from them again. A private number called one morning. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jessica, Mom's voice was tired, worn down. I just wanted to talk. I closed my eyes. I should have hung up. I should have ignored it. But something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding. She just sounded empty. What is it, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice calm. A long silence. Then, I lost the house. I inhaled sharply. I shouldn't have cared, but there was something so final about it. The bank took it last week, she continued. Cindy moved in with a friend. I'm staying with Aunt Angela, but she's furious about the whole Italy thing. She won't even look at me. I said nothing. Her voice cracked. I didn't think it would end up like this. And there it was. Regret. Not regret for how she had treated me. Not regret for giving me away. Just regret that her choices had consequences. I let out a slow breath. I hope you figure things out, Mom. That's it? She whispered. After everything, you're just going to walk away? I walked away a long time ago, I said softly. You just didn't notice. Then I ended the call, and this time, I didn't feel guilty. Life moved on. I started saying yes to things I had always put off. A weekend getaway with friends, a new hobby, a date that I actually allowed myself to enjoy, without feeling like I was somehow betraying my responsibilities. I laughed more. I slept better. One Sunday afternoon, I found myself sitting at my desk, flipping through old travel brochures. My next trip was already booked. Paris. Cindy had always begged me to bring her back something from Paris. And now, I was going for myself. As I stared at the flight details, I thought about the version of me from years ago. The girl who had stood outside a kitchen doorway, overhearing her mother give her away. The girl who had spent so much of her life trying to earn love that was never there. I wished I could tell her that she would be okay. That one day, she would look in the mirror and see someone whole. That one day, she would stop searching for a home in people who didn't deserve her. That one day, she would realize she had been her own home all along. I smiled. Then I closed my laptop and went to pack. There was a whole world waiting for me, and this time, I was ready.